want to thank you guys for being a part of Blue Ridge this morning. If you're a visitor here, I think most everybody has been here at least one other time, but if I've missed you and have not seen you yet, thanks for being a part of us. Trent is on vacation today. This was the last vacation of 2025 that kind of goes into 2026, so it's kind of also the first vacation that he takes of the year as well. But he will be back again and be heading right back into his preaching theme, but today we're going to take a break from the from his Old Testament theme. I'm kind of different when I do preaching. I am not a Bible scholar. I want you guys to understand that up front. I am not a Bible scholar. I did not graduate Bible college. I did not go and get a doctorate degree. I did not study real hard when I was in Bible college. But what I have done is I have matured in my faith, and I have matured in how I read the Bible. And I want you to understand, just out of transparency, that today's message is not actually something that I came up with on my own. I was listening to a podcast a few weeks ago, and on this podcast, they were talking about something that I have always been curious about. And so it got me to thinking, I need to ask you this question as well. Is there anything in your life that you just be curious about? It doesn't fit. It seems weird. It's out of place. And it could be anything from a phrase that you've heard your grandparents say growing up. It could be anything that you've seen on a sign. It could be something that you've read somewhere. There's all kinds of things I know because, well, this is America, right? But let me give you a couple examples of what I'm talking about. Something that seems weird and out of place to me. Why is there Braille on a drive-up ATM? I'm sure there's a reason for it. I'm sure there's a purpose for it, but it just doesn't make sense. It seems kind of weird and out of place that a blind person would be driving to an ATM to get money. Now, I understand they can be taken to the ATM, they can get out, and they can go around and touch buttons, but it just always has been a curiosity to me. Something else that seems like a curiosity, seems kind of weird, out of place. Why do we drive on a parkway and park on a driveway? That's always been a conundrum to me. I also understand that maybe back in the early years when they had plantations and there was not as many neighbors around, that the driveways, sort of that we call, were very long, and so they were actually driveways. I get that, and I understand that. But as I read the Bible, there is something that in the Bible has always been a curiosity. It's always seemed out of place to me. And I understand that there is a reason for it. There's a purpose for it, because everything in the Bible has a reason and a purpose and a plan for how it was all put together. But I never understood why. I was always curious. Why is this here in this spot? And it wasn't until I was listening to this podcast that I found one of my answers. Now, I have to tell you something else. As I have matured and grown in my faith in Christ, and as I've matured and grown in how I study and read the Bible, I have changed how I look at other people and their messages. Again, we are in America. I spent last night probably 2 hours watching videos of false preachers, of people who claim to be in God's Word and teaching God's Word, but their preaching does not align up to the Bible. And so I have learned that I have to check things that other people say. And so today I'm going to give you two invitations. And the first invitation I'm going to give you is an invitation to check me. Because I want to be transparent with you. I want to be honest with you. I've already told you I'm not a Bible scholar, so I don't know everything. I am not as good as Trent and Dave. And so sometimes when I get to talking and when I am reading the Bible, I read into things that may not need to be there. And I also happen to tell people these things. And then I get told that, hey, you weren't completely right with that. And I'm good with that. I need to be told these things. And so my first invitation for you guys is for you to take out pen and paper. Because I'm going to go real fast today, because there's like 16 sermons that could come out of this one. I'm going to try not to keep you here that long. But I want you to take notes, and I want you to specifically write down the 2 scriptures that we're going to study. And I need you to go back and study them yourself and see if I am on point. Or as the kids say today, see if I'm cooking, right? Thanks, Allie. I appreciate that. I don't understand that. It seems weird and out of place, especially for me to say something like that. But I want you to check me. I want you to take notes, because that is what I did with this podcast. This podcast, they were talking about a specific couple of scriptures that I'm going to talk about today, and I had to find out for myself, is what they said correct? And so I need you to do the same thing to me. Now, if I was to put a title on this, if you put titles on your notes, the title would be The Fringe. Okay? If I was to put a theme to this, because one of the things that I learned in one of the videos I watched last night is that 2025, one of the biggest themes that a lot of these mega churches and these preachers went through, one of their biggest themes that they did as a collective was the theme of taking secular songs and preaching about them. Okay? I'm not going to do that. I'm not as brave as Harry. I'm not going to sing for you this morning. You're welcome. But if there was a theme for this, it would be Jeopardy. And here's why. Because I'm going to give you the answer first. And then we're going to go and we're going to talk about the question. So if you would, turn with me to the Old Testament. It's going to be Malachi, and it's going to be Malachi chapter 4. Now, as you're turning to Malachi chapter 4, I'm going to give you a short background of Malachi. Malachi is not a small prophet. I don't know how tall he was, but he is a minor prophet. And there's 2 kind of prophets in the Old Testament. There's major prophets and minor prophets, and the deciding factor of whether they were a major prophet or a minor prophet had nothing to do with their messages. It had to do more along with how long their books were. Malachi is a minor prophet because he only has 4 chapters in his book, and each chapter has shorter verses. In fact, chapter 4 only has 5 verses in it. And that is why we call Malachi a minor prophet. So as we read this, just keep in mind that you are in a short book, short verses, but a powerful, powerful message. If you go to the very beginning of chapter 4 and you look at it, in my Bible it gives a title, it gives an description, it calls the Great Day of the Lord. Okay? So Malachi is prophesying about the Lord, or as we would call him, Jesus. So I'm going to start reading. We're going to read verses 1 and 2. And it says this: For behold, the day is coming, burning like an oven, when all the arrogant and the evildoers will be stubble. The day that is coming shall set them ablaze, says the Lord of hosts, so that it will leave them neither root nor branch. But for you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall rise with healing in its wings. You shall go out leaping like calves from the stall. We're going to stop right there. There's 2 words in verse 2 that I want to focus on. And this is the answer, okay? The answer has to do with birds' wings. Are you confused yet? Okay, good. Now, in order for us to understand this, and something else that I have done as I mature and study the Bible, and this is probably something that David has done for many, many years, when you are studying certain verses, there are certain key words in these verses. And wings in verse 2 is one of those key words that I had to go back, and I wanted to know what the Hebrew word for wings was. So when it's translated from Hebrew to English, I would know what the Hebrew word means. Now, the Hebrew word for wings here is kanaf, K-A-N-A-P-H. Now, I have, because I went to Bible college, this is one of the books that we had to have. I have a big boat anchor of a book. And you could almost use this book as a boat anchor if you're stranded and you happen to have it with you. Why you would have it with you, I don't know. Maybe you're better than me and you like to study out in a boat. Great. But it's called the Strong's Concordance. It's about this big, and it's about this thick, and it has every word that you would need to know that is in Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic. And so I don't carry that book anymore right now. In fact, it's sitting next to my bed where I usually write my sermons, and if I need to look at a hard copy, I'll pick it up. But I go to the easier thing, the internet, right? Because it fits here. It's not here. And I'm not flipping pages. I'm flipping pages. It's just so much easier. So when I looked it up, Kanaf has 3 English translations. First translation is the literal translation. It means a bird's wing. The second translation is the edge of a garment. The third translation is the edge of the world. So the answer that I'm going to give you, if we were playing Jeopardy, the answer would be to fulfill prophecy. Okay? Are you still confused? Good. Let's get to the question. The question that I have, and the question that I've always had, is why is this story here? And in order for us to understand what story I'm talking about, you need to turn to Luke chapter 8. A little bit of background about this story. This story is in the middle of another story. This story is a story of healing that is in the middle of another story of healing. And I've always wondered, why is this story here? What is the reasoning for it? Jesus is on his way. He has just come back from somewhere, and he's teaching in a crowd, or he's in a crowd of people, and a man named Jairus comes up to him. Now, Jairus is a leader. It just says that he's a ruler. We'll read that here in a second. But he's a ruler who has a daughter who is sick and is dying. And so we already have the basis of a true miracle that is going to happen, because he comes and presents himself to Jesus and asks Jesus, hey, my daughter is dying. I need you to come and heal her. We've done everything we can. Come heal her. And so we already have this story of a man who has desperate need to save his daughter from death. And here we go. Now our story picks up down around verse 43. But I'm going to go ahead and read the whole account. Oops. I marked the wrong book. Bear with me for a second. I'm going to start in verse 40, and we're going to read down a little ways, and we're going to have another pause. Verse 40 starts out like this. Now when Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, and they were all waiting for him. And there came a man named Jairus, who was a ruler of the synagogue, and falling at Jesus' feet, he implored him to come to his house. For he had an only daughter about 12 years of age, and she was dying. As Jesus went, the people pressed around him, and there was a woman. Now pay attention to this, because this is where the weird story comes in. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years. Though she had spent all her living on physicians, she could not be healed by anyone. She came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment, and immediately her discharge of blood ceased. And Jesus said, "Who is it that has touched me?" And when they all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the crowd surround you and are pressing on you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me, for I perceive the power has gone out of me." We're going to pause right there. This story of the healing of the bleeding woman has always seemed, up to now, weird and out of place for me. And here's why. It's because, as I already said, Jairus has come and said, "I need you to come heal my daughter." And Jesus says, "Okay, let's go." And he's on his way. He's on his way to do a miracle already. Why did Luke interject this whole other story that takes the thunder away from the original story? In my thinking, couldn't Luke have put it in before this? Well, couldn't the woman and Jesus had done their situation after the healing of the girl? I don't have that answer, other than the fact that the reason this story is here, one of them, is to fulfill prophecy. Are you confused yet? There is a word that is used in Luke here. And by the way, this story is also in Matthew. Matthew's story is not as in-depth as Luke's story. That's why I chose to read Luke's story. But there's a word here where in verse 44 that we have to go and we have to dive deep into for you to understand the connection between the Malachi verse and this verse. And that verse in Luke chapter 8, verse 44 is fringe. Now, to understand what the fringe is, first thing we need to understand is what the Greek word for fringe means. Well, the Greek word for fringe means the edge of a garment. Do you see the connection now? It took me almost 40-some years to figure out where and why this story was here and what the connection is. The connection is that Malachi, over 430-some odd years ago, prophesied about this moment in time. The other thing that we need to understand is Jesus. Now, Jesus is a rabbi. And there were certain articles of clothing that rabbis were to wear. One of those articles of clothing was tied to their waist was 4 pieces of rope that would hang down. One would hang down on each side on the front, and one would hang down on each side in the back. And at the very bottom is a tassel. Another word for tassel is fringe. And so we read this story and we understand that there is a connection between Malachi's verse talking about the edge of a garment and this verse talking about the fringe, the part of Jesus' garment that the woman touches. But you know what? It goes deeper than that. It wasn't until I made those two connections that I was able to connect why the purpose of one of the purposes of what this is here for. But there's even a bigger purpose of it as I figured out when I studied it to write my sermon. Normally what I would do is I would read, these are great stories. These are great. They show Jesus' power in doing a miracle. And I'm sure that we all understand who Jesus is and what Jesus did and all the different places and all the different things and all the different healings that he did. But this one is very, very important. Reason being is because Jesus did not touch the woman. This is the one and only story that I can remember that Jesus' power left him through the touch that the woman made to a piece of garment. And so there is a much more in-depth and more powerful thing. Now, some more things that I had deep dove into that we have to understand about these. I'm going to connect these two stories, the Jairus' daughter and the woman's two stories. There's two things that should not have happened in these two stories. The first thing that should not have ever happened, not that it shouldn't happen, but according to how things were going in the time of Jesus, the ruler of this man Jairus, being a ruler of the synagogue, should not have presented himself to Jesus and asked Jesus to do this miracle. It's great that he did. But here's the problem. Jairus could have lost everything had his co-workers known what he was doing. Because of the difference, the battle that was going on between Jesus and the synagogue and the rulers and the Pharisees and the high priest, Jairus is up there, he's with them, and when he comes and presents himself to Jesus and asks Jesus to come and do a miracle, this goes against everything that they believed in. They did not want Jesus to do these things. They did not want Jesus to show himself in these powers. They thought it was blasphemous. And for Jairus to be the one that comes and does this and leads in having Jesus come and do a miracle at his house could have lost everything. The second thing that we have to talk about is the woman. She should not have been there. because she had been bleeding for 12 years. I'm not going to go deep into what this bleeding was because, well, A, it's kind of embarrassing for men to talk about. I'm just going to be honest with you. And B, I don't know enough about it. I can only tell you what I know. And these are the things that I know. There is speculation that this woman was bleeding because she either had polyps in her uterus or she had a hemorrhage in her uterus that caused her to continually bleed. And this was on top of her, you get it, right? And so she was not supposed to even be near anybody. She was supposed to be set apart because if you had any kind of a bodily discharge that was bleeding or pus or anything like that, you were deemed unclean. You were not to be in a large crowd. You were not to be around other people. You were to be separated. And if you did happen to come in contact, not physical contact, but if you did have to be around people, you were to be yelling, unclean, unclean, so that others would not accidentally come up and brush against you. Because if they touched you, now they are considered unclean, and they would have to go and do a ritualistic cleaning. So two things in these two stories that should not have happened, that did, that makes this story even more powerful. Now, we're going to set Jairus aside for a moment, and we're going to dive deep into this woman. Something else that I have skimmed over for 40-some-odd years until just here recently when I read this story. This woman finds her way through a crowd, a tight, large crowd, finds her way through this crowd and touches the edge of Jesus' garment. And one of the things that I had to learn was it wasn't a normal, hey, excuse me, walk up to Jesus and reach out and touch his arm. It wasn't a normal, hey, Jesus, it wasn't one of those kind of situations. This woman, knowing that she was not supposed to be around anybody, in my picturing of what happened, the Bible doesn't tell us exactly how, but this is the picture that I get. This woman kind of slides her way through the crowd on the ground. Because where she reaches out and touches Jesus as low to the ground as you can possibly get. Because these fringes would touch the bottoms of their feet almost. And so this woman, she's there's another verse in Matthew. I forgot to look it up before I came up here, but there's another verse in Matthew that talks about being as sly as a serpent, but innocent as a dove. That's another conundrum that I've always had because Jesus says this. And it's when he's sending his disciples out to preach for the first time. He's given them this order, which is kind of, to me, out of character for Jesus. When I hear the word serpent in the Bible, I go back to Genesis and I understand the serpent as Satan. Why, Jesus, are you calling us to be? That's an add-on, but this is a perfect representation of this woman. She's being sly as a serpent, but innocent as a dove. She knows she's not supposed to be there, so she gets as low to the ground as she possibly can. And she gets in there and she reaches out to the lowest part of Jesus, almost all the way on the ground. And the reason being is because, well, this might be the easiest way. If you're walking through a large crowd, there's usually gaps down around below the waist and all that stuff where everything is tied up here because you're bumping, your shoulders are a little bit broader than maybe your steps are. And so maybe that was the easiest path that she could take. There's a good idea that maybe she's doing this because she knows that she has to humble herself before Jesus. There's a thought that maybe she does it this way because she's less detected this way. Because as the crowd is walking with Jesus, it says the crowd is pressing against each other and against Jesus. And I can just see that she's like, okay, I'm just going to sneak my way through. And all I have to do is reach out and touch Jesus. And I will be healed. this scene plays out in The Chosen. And I don't remember the whole thing and how it all works. But after she touches Jesus, Jesus stops. And I get this funny picture of when Jesus stops, and as tight as this crowd is, they hit each other, right? It's kind of like the cartoons. Jesus stops, and all of a sudden he's like, oh, wait. But Jesus stops because he feels the power leaving his body. And he says, "Who touched me?" Of course, nobody wants to admit that they touched him. They all want to touch him, but nobody wants to admit to it because maybe it's his tone and his voice. Who touched me? Maybe it's that they don't want to be the one to stop the crowd. I touched you, but I'm not going to say anything because you stopped. You're supposed to be walking. I don't want to be the one in trouble for stopping what's supposed to be happening here. But Jesus says, "Who touched me?" And everybody's looking around and wondering, who is it? Who's touched Jesus? Why did you get to touch him and not me? And Peter looks at Jesus and says, "Jesus, it's not going to be easy to know who touched you because so many people are wanting to touch you. There's so many people here. They're pressing against one another. They're pressing up against us. How are we to know who touched you?" And there's a small, silent voice down on the ground still, who felt the power of Jesus leave Jesus' body and come into her, and she is healed immediately. Perhaps she's staying on the ground praising what happened, Jesus, for what happened. Maybe she's staying on the ground ashamed that she touched Jesus and took away his power. And we're going to get back to that in just a minute. I don't know why, but she's still on the ground, and there's this small, still voice, and I can just see the crowd part. It was me. And when they look and they see there's this woman who's been bleeding for 12 years, what is she doing here? How did she get into the middle of this crowd? How did she touch? She touched Jesus, so now Jesus is unclean. What are we going to do about all this? I can just see the thoughts and all the disciples going, well, now we got to go and cleanse ourselves before we go over to Jairus' house. That's going to be a delay. Now we're already in a delay because now the crowd and Jesus has stopped on their way there. There's so much going on here. And there's so many sermons that we could pull out of just this one little instance in time. And Jesus turns to the woman. We're going to continue reading here. And I'm going to back up just a little bit. We're going to go ahead and read verse 46 again. It says, "But Jesus said, 'Someone touched me, for I perceive that the power has gone out of me.' And when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him, declared in the presence of all people why she had touched him, and how she had immediately healed. And he said to her, 'Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace.'" So as she has reached out and touched just the fringe of Jesus' garment, she realizes that she's been healed. And Jesus tells her, "You are well. To go in peace." This is a very, very powerful moment in her life and in Jesus' life. Nowhere else in the Bible does Jesus say, "I have no more power. The power has gone from me." This is the only spot. Now let's go back to Jairus. Jairus is there. He's leading Jesus to the house, and he sees what is going on. He hears what's going on, and he hears the word of Jesus. If I was Jairus, I would be very, very upset. Not only at Jesus, but I would also probably, not only at the woman, but I would probably also be very upset with Jesus. Because here I am, I'm leading you to my house. The whole purpose of us being in the street in the first place is because you're coming to my house. You're coming to do something for me. You're coming to heal my only daughter. It'd be like asking Jesus to go to my house and heal Kiera. And Kiera, I will tell you, Kiera and I have a very strong bond. She's my girl. She's my little girl. And I would do anything for her. I would protect her with everything that I own. I would go to jail for her if I had to. These are just thoughts that go through my mind because I'm her dad. I want her to know that I have her best interest in mind. And Jairus is probably feeling the same way. This is my only daughter. I need you to come heal her. And here he is. He sees Jesus stopping. Why are we stopping, Jesus? We need to keep going. She's on death's bed. She's dying. If we don't keep going, there's a chance I will lose my daughter. Why are we stopping? And then the next thing he hears out of Jesus' mouth is, I felt the power leave my body. Great. Now you don't even have power to heal my daughter. The whole purpose of why we're going to my house. Why me? What are you doing to me, Jesus? This woman's not even supposed to be here. This woman's not even supposed to be touching you. And here you've allowed this to happen. You have allowed her to take the power away from you. What about my daughter? What about me? What about my needs? These are thoughts that are going through my head as a father of a daughter. These are things that I would probably, be honest with you, these are things that I would probably be shouting at Jesus at the top of my voice. Because if we were to read a little bit further down into the story here, as Jesus is talking to the woman, Jairus' servants come up. And they tell Jairus, don't waste Jesus' time anymore, for your daughter has died. Now what? Now what am I supposed to do? My daughter has died. The whole purpose we were out here in this street, and all of this stuff has happened for this woman. How many times in our life have we gone through and we have seen God do great things to other people, and we are asking the question, why not me? What are you going to do for me? How are you going to save my family members? How are you going to take this sickness away from me? How are you going to help me with my sin? Because you're too busy helping everybody else with their problems and leaving me alone. I've felt that way a couple times. Again, I want to be transparent with you guys. I'm only human. I feel this way sometimes. In my job, I go and remodel and I do things and build things and make things great for other people. But if you go to my house, not so much, right? My wife has got a list of about 6 miles long of things that she's waiting for me to fix. And she's probably asking, when are you going to do this for me, Chris? Right? I watch videos of all these other companies, even here in town, that do great things and wonderful things. And I'm like, well, when am I going to get a chance to do that? I see things happening in church here with you guys. And there's times that I leave church asking God, when are you going to do that for me, God? What about me? You're doing it for everybody else. You're doing great things for everybody else. I had a family member die. I have a family member who's sick. I have a family member who needs money. I have a family member who needs shelter. What about my family? What about me? Why am I the one that has to be punished for what they got and their situation? These may be some of the thoughts that are going through Jairus' mind. But let's put things to ease here. Let's put things to bed. And just say that Jesus does end up going to Jairus' house. And he reaches out. After kicking everybody else out of the house, he takes Peter, James, and John with him up to the daughter's room. And he reaches out and he touches the daughter and wakes her up. Because he tells Jairus, don't worry, your daughter is not dead. She is only sleeping. Why? Because there is still enough power in Jesus to do for you as much as he's doing for other people. And to me, that is one of the biggest reasons why this story is here. Sure, Jesus could have walked all the way to Jairus' house, no interruptions, no issues, no nothing going on, and healed Jairus. But would that have been as powerful as for us to understand that Jesus did something for one person and lost power, but still had enough power to continue on with the journey and finish it with them? The point of this story, the weirdness of having this story interjected into a much bigger story, answers the question, why is this here? Why now? And it's because Jesus has enough power for all of us. And it's taken me some 40 years to realize this. I have to ask for forgiveness quite often because my mouth, my attitude, my brain, it gets me in trouble a lot. And if I was Jairus, if I was Jairus at that moment and I'm angry with God, or if I'm wondering or I'm questioning God, I would also have to hit my knees as the woman did and ask Jesus for forgiveness because of my attitude. And I do that because, like I said, I see all these other things happening around the world for me, and I don't get to partake of it. One of the greatest questions that people have asked, one of many great questions that I've had a lot of people ask me, is why does a non-Christian seem to be more successful than a Christian? There's many variations of that question. It could be, why do non-Christians get treated better? Why do non-Christians have more money? Why do non-Christians have more things? Why do non-Christians get healed from sicknesses better or faster or easier than a lot of Christians do? And up until a few days ago, a few weeks ago, I really didn't have a good answer for that. The only answer I had is because God makes it rain on the just and the unjust. That's not really an answer. I mean, it is an answer. It is a biblical answer because that's what God says. But I think these two stories together really answer that question completely. Another question that gets asked quite often by Christians that I really don't have a good answer for. And it's a very hard question to figure out the answer for. And that question is why did my neighbor, or why did my friend, or why did my family member, or why did this person over here get healed from their sickness? Why did that person get their sin taken away? Why did that person gain something when I've been asking for the exact same thing for years and I have not been answered? Is God listening? Is Jesus listening to me? Why them and not me? What am I doing wrong? And that's a great question. And I wish I had a great answer for it, but this is the only answer I can come up with. And I think it's a biblical answer. And it's not an answer you're going to want to hear. But one of the reasons why I believe God heals certain people and doesn't heal others, even as Christians or non-Christians, it doesn't matter, is what He can do in you without being healed. That's the question I have. What can Jesus do through you, in you, without healing you? There's an example in the Bible of Paul. And Paul went through so much in his life. He was shipwrecked multiple times. He was stoned multiple times. He was imprisoned multiple times. He was tortured multiple times. He was beat multiple times. He had deformities. He had illnesses. There's in one place in I'm not even going to pretend that I remember which book, but one of his books at the end, he says, "See that I'm writing in large letters." And we say that it's because he was going blind, which is probably a valid thing. But Paul asked God, "Take this thorn from my flesh from me," right? He whatever it is, whether it's a physical ailment, a sickness that he's going through, or maybe he's dealing with a sin, it doesn't tell us what it is. We can only speculate what it is. And I've read a lot of people speculate that, oh, he was dealing with a sin, or he was dealing with guilt from what he was doing in his past, and he was feeling bad about it, and he was asking God to take that guilt away from him. But God did not take his guilt or his illness or his sin or whatever it is away from him. His answer to Paul was, "My grace is sufficient for you." God's not picking on you. God's not picking on me when he doesn't give me what I want. He's not picking on me when he heals somebody else with the same illness that I have and I have to suffer with it. God is not picking on me because he gave somebody else their dream farm with miniature animals that they get to have cuddle with every night and whatever else, and I don't get mine yet. God's not picking on me or us when he does this. But God has a plan for you. God has a plan for this situation in your life. And if I could tell you, the easiest answer is be patient. Remain faithful. Because maybe that's what God is asking of you. Maybe God is asking you to remain faithful. Understand that in time, I will either heal you or I will get you through this situation one way or another. Don't worry about what's going on around us. Don't worry about me healing that person over there, because the reason I healed that person over there is to save them from something worse that you can handle, they can't. And that's a tough pill to swallow. It really is. I understand that. I know that. And there's many of you in our congregation today that have gone through these kind of situations and are going through illnesses physically right now that you see other people being healed from that you are still suffering from. And you may be asking yourself, why am I still the one suffering and not being healed from this when that person over there who's not even going to church or has no acknowledgement of God in their life got healed? Well, maybe God is showing his power to them through their healing, and he already knows that you know the power he has. Maybe he's given you a ministry that is going to be the most successful ministry you will ever be a part of. There's so many different reasons and so many different answers. I don't have a good one for you other than to be patient. Just like Jairus was probably questioning Jesus, why stop? Why not heal my daughter now? And Jesus says, be patient. Your time will come. And it may not be on this side of life. Your time may come when it comes to being in heaven. And when you get to heaven, you will have an opportunity to ask Jesus, hey, what was the reason why I went and suffered for so long with that? And he will give you the exact answer you need to hear. And I think the reason these two stories are tied together at this moment in these two people's lives, the bleeding woman and Jairus's and his family's and his daughter, is to show that there is a unity in what Jesus does. Jesus chose to allow this woman to touch him. Quite honestly, Jesus is going to do what Jesus is going to do. He could have said, you know what, I'm not going to go to your house. And that would have possibly taken the opportunity for this woman to even see Jesus walking down the street. He may have said, you know what, as I've done before, I've spoken healing over your daughter. She's well. Go home. Or he could have taken a complete different route that this woman had no idea where he was going or where he was and made it to Jairus. Says, we don't know why this woman was at the right place at the right time, but she was. And Jesus allowed it so that she could be healed, to see his power working through her. At the same time, Jairus had to be patient so that his faith would grow exponentially, knowing that there is still power in Jesus' blood. I have to ask you guys this question today. What is it that you ask Jesus, why not me? Why not today? I have suffered from cancer. I have suffered from a lung issue. I have suffered from arthritis. I have suffered from a leg issue. I have suffered from, and you have an answer for that. I have suffered through a lot of situations. I've made it through all of them. I have not been as, we'll just say I've not been as lucky as some of you guys. But what I have had to deal with and the things that I have gone through is different than what you guys have gone through. And maybe you're the lucky ones that you hadn't had to go through what I've gone through. But Jesus brings us through all these different things to produce an idea of faith in each and every one of us. So if you're dealing with a physical thing, I want to encourage you, hold on. Reach out. Maybe that's what Jesus is calling for you to do, just to reach out and touch the fringe. Maybe it's a sin that you've been dealing with in life. Again, we go back to Paul. There's an idea that he was dealing with a lifelong sin that he just could not get rid of. And if we were going to be honest with ourselves and if we were going to be honest with each other, we all have that sin in our life, don't we? We have that one sin that we love to go back to. We want to get rid of it, but it's so easy to get right back into. Whatever that sin is, and I'm going to call out a lot of different sins, and if this is yours, I'm not pointing my finger at you. But there's a sin of alcohol and drugs addiction. There's the sin of pornography, the sin of lust, the sin of lying, the sin of gossip. These are easy sins to continue to fall back into. There's the sin of thinking we are better than others. Right? It's called haughtiness. There's so many sins that we could talk about. And there's so many things that we could point fingers at ourselves and say, hey, that's me. And you know what? I've asked God to take this away from me. I've prayed. I've been on my knees, and the Bible says I have implored Jesus to come and save me from this sin, take this sin from me. But yet I keep finding myself falling back into this sin. Why won't Jesus take this away from me? In my mind, this is the one thing that has kept me from being the most faithful person, having the best relationship I can have with Jesus. And these are thoughts that I have in my mind quite often. As I am hitting my knees and asking God, forgive me again, please. There's often times that I hit my knees and I ask God, please don't give up on me. I don't want this sin, but yet I'm in it again. If this is you suffering from that, maybe this is your chance to reach out and touch the fringe. Well, preacher, what does it look like to reach out and touch? Obviously, we're not going to see Jesus walking down the street, so I can't just reach out and touch him. Well, have you tried everything spiritually? Have you tried praying about it? Yeah, I've prayed about it a lot. And yet here it is. I'm still sick. I'm still in this sin. Okay? Well, have you studied the Word? Well, yeah, I read the Bible. Like some. Well, that might be the next step, is read the Bible more. There's something that a couple of us did on January 1st, something that I chose to do for myself and shared it with others so that if they wanted to do it with me, because I believe there's power in unity, and there was at least one other person that did this with me. One of the things that I have found is there's certain spiritual disciplines. One of them that I have a very hard time doing is fasting. I tried to fast many years ago and almost ended up in the hospital because of my metabolism at that time. Ran 100,000 miles an hour, and with no food, I just was done. But I chose to fast and pray on January 1st to bring in the new year the correct way. And I'm not telling you this because I want you to think I'm the best at this. I'm not telling you this because I want you to be proud of me. I'm telling you this because I have found through that day, fasting and praying together, what power there is in that. So if you have a time that you know that you don't have to exert a lot of energy, or if you have questions about what fasting is, because there's so many different fasts. I chose to not eat solid food. But there's fasting from taking time away from things that you do on a normal daily basis, such as watching TV, looking at your phone. Those are ways that you can fast. And you just pick a certain amount of time and say, I'm not going to do it for this amount of time. And instead, I'm going to be on my knees in prayer. And I'm going to be imploring God for many different things. The biggest thing that I implored God for was power and use of Blue Ridge Christian Church. And you guys as a congregation. But fasting and praying together, man, what a powerful bond that is. It can be life-changing. And maybe that's what Christ is calling you to do, is just to lay down something that you have a habit of doing and just spend that extra time with Him. Because when you do these certain things, when you read when you read His Scripture, when you're praying to Him, when you're fasting, and when you're doing other things spiritually, you're gaining, you're growing in your faith, and maybe that is what God is calling you to do. Just to take that one next step. See, this woman had an idea, and I in this podcast, they talked about there was a possibility that this woman had read the Scriptures, and that she had read this one verse in Malachi, and she had understood on her own that if there's powerful in the edge of Jesus' garment, maybe that is my next step. Maybe that is the one thing I've got to go to, and I've got to touch Him. What is Jesus calling you to do for your next step? To build your faith, to build your relationship with Him. But here's the thing. I wish I could stand up here and tell you that when you do all of these things, that it is a direct, automatic, I'm going to heal you. But I can't. I can't say this. I can't do that because I'm not Jesus. That is something that you and Jesus have to work out. This woman stepped out in faith, and she crawled through a crowd, and she reached her hand out, and she touched Jesus. She made that next step. She did that next thing. And Jairus had enough faith to allow Jesus to continue the journey to his house and heal his daughter. Both of them had faith. Both of them had an end result of life. What about you? See, there's one more thing that I need to talk about, and Steve, if you want to start working your way up, we'll start closing this door here. There's a crowd, as we read, around Jesus. And you could look at this crowd and you could say, well, yeah, it was just a lot of people. Well, let's just say this crowd represents distraction. Let's just say this crowd could represent the fact that this woman could have looked at all these people and said, there is no way I'm going to get to Jesus, and gave up. But she did not let the crowd stop her. She did not let distraction, she did not let hopelessness, she did not let any other thought stop her from getting to Jesus. She did what she had to do to get to Jesus. And she was willing to do this in front of a lot of people. I don't know how many people were there. There could have been hundreds of people. There could have been 20s of people. I don't know. But there was enough people there that she was probably embarrassed in the first place to even think, I've got to go and touch Jesus to be healed. But she had to fight this crowd. She had to get past that obstacle. And so I want to invite you to do something this morning. We have an invitation here every Sunday morning. And I want you to, I don't know if you guys understand what the invitation is for. But there's two things the invitation is for. One, the invitation is for you to make a decision to better your relationship with Jesus. Whether it's to lay down a sin and lay down a past life and to step into the baptistry and gain a different and a newness of life. Maybe it's just for you to come and get prayed for. Maybe it's just a moment for you to just come down and spend just a few moments, just you and Jesus, you and God. But it is a time for you to make a decision. It is a time for you to gain healing through the power of what Jesus can do at this moment. The second thing is, and this is the part that a lot of people don't talk about. The second thing is for you to be an example. Because I'm in a church with very strong believers. But I'm in a church with strong believers with hurt. I'm in a church with strong believers who have stuff in their life. And I have to be very careful how I continue here. And I want you to know the heart, not necessarily the thoughts or the words, okay? And keep in mind that I have prayed the Holy Spirit over this sermon for days now. So this may be the Holy Spirit speaking to you, not Chris McPeak. But you can be the example that somebody else needs to see the strength that it takes to come forward. I don't care how long you've been a Christian. I don't care what you're going through in life. You have an opportunity to be an example. And I know you guys have stuff in your life that could be taken care of. I have stuff in my life that can be taken care of. And the one thing that I have not seen but one time in Blue Ridge's history that I've been here in the last 20-some years is a full crowd down here praying. And the one time that I've seen a long crowd, they were here to put their membership in. And that's an awesome thing. That's a great thing. I'm not trying to downplay anything that a single person can come down here and do. But if I'm going to be honest with you, I have a dream that, and I'm not the only one that has this dream, but I have a dream that at some point, the church, not necessarily just Blue Ridge Christian Church, but the church of God will admit to themselves that it's okay, even as I have been a Christian for 40-some years, that I need prayer, that I need to come down and I need to spend a couple moments with Jesus, just with Him alone. And that there would be a crowd that you have to fight through to get to this spot. It means nothing necessarily to me other than the fact that I see that I am no longer alone in this world in my spot. You don't have to. Absolutely don't have to. But how often, how many times have you left this building thinking, man, I should have asked for prayer. Man, I should have talked to Jesus a little bit longer. Man, I needed to spend just a couple more moments. I do it about every week. And that's on me. Because I have an opportunity to come forward. I have an opportunity to come and be that example. I have an opportunity to come and spend that moment with Christ. I don't have to talk to you. Trent does not have to talk to you. This is not a moment between you, me, and Trent or anybody else. This is a moment between you and Jesus. This might be your moment for you to reach out and fight the crowd, fight the distractions, fight whatever Satan is putting in your heart and your mind, and reach out and touch Jesus' fringe. It's entirely up to you. Now, if you choose not to do that this morning, just know that you will always have an opportunity. We always have a lady in the back corner, and I'm always available. Dave's available. There's others that are available here this morning that are willing to pray with you separately. And that's okay. That's a good thing. And I'm more than willing to do that for you. But I want to encourage you that no matter what you're going through, no matter what you're dealing with, that there is power in Jesus if only you are willing to reach out and get it.
Should nothing of our efforts stand, no legacy